We're gonna get started. Sit down. Hey, welcome back to the Tim Weisselbaum Show. I did not mean to start it off on a sour note of telling y'all to quiet down like Lord at her concert. Because it looks bad when somebody comes to your show and the first thing you do is tell them to quiet down. It's funny. It's funny when you do that thinking that people are gonna... Okay, so you know how Lorde shushed people? It was a viral video that came out a couple of years ago when she was still selling tickets. She hasn't put out a good song in about 10 years. When she first put out that song Royals, everybody was like, what the hell is this? Why does she look like a fish? And then you find out that she's a girl and she's only 17 and she's making a really good artistic song. It's like, wow, that's interesting. She looks like she has like an interesting, she looks like something about that video. Just she wasn't fully developed as a person. I think that's why, 'cause she was literally a kid. So once you become an adult, you kind of realize that when you were a kid, that's when you were better at coming up with shit, at coming up with creative shit. So now that you're an adult, you're not as creative because you get it fossilizes. It ossifies into some broken ass, some bona fide form, which is not open to creativity. It just goes with the same program. So anyway, I didn't mean to start the episode out by telling y'all to be quiet, but I kind of like people actually hear what I'm saying. So if people are talking during the show, I can't help but find it distracting. I don't know why to do that inflection. It's distracting. Did it require a perfect fifth to describe, to convey that piece of information? No. People like to talk in musical intervals. We all do it, even right there. Intervals. Do, 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 do. You know, notice it, it's not usually something you pick up on. You don't pick up on the exact intervals. Do, 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 do. But they're in there. You can't really convey a good sentence without the musicality. There's literal music theory that supports what I'm doing right now. The la ba 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 ba. Ba ba. That's a unison. That's just the same note twice. Ba ba. But you go ba 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 ba. That's a descending melodic phrase with words. It's lyrical and it's musical because language is musical when it's spoken language. On paper, it doesn't do much, but spoken language is inherently musical in the most literal sense of the word. It's literally pitches related to each other in ways that have a meaning to them. There's a semantics to the intervals that I just described. It's subtle, and also it's subjective. Of course, there's no objective meaning to when you go ba-ba, but it does have a meaning. When you go, that's a perfect fit. Bam-ba, bam-ba. It's a relationship that you can memorize because it has a very distinct crystallized sound to it. Bam, 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 bam. It literally sounds like something going up and down, like a swing going up and down by a huge angle. It creates a spatial distance whenever you do that interval. Ba 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 ba. So it keeps going. Every pitch has you could go up or down any interval. It's fun. That's why talking is fun if you use that type of grammar. It's sort of a form of grammar when you go, bam, bam. That was something. What was that? Bam, 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 bam. It's like a minor second. That's not even barely an interval. La. That's literally the closest pitch to that pitch. I thought it was bigger. That means I don't have good ears. La la. Those are separated by a minor second, meaning basically there's no distance between those notes. They're just gradations of the same note in between the two notes. They're two notes. Ba ba. Those are two notes. Ba ba. Those are two notes. But there's nothing in between them except for a spectrum of in between notes, which are just blends, combinations of the two notes. The chromatic sound of ba and ba, there is something in between those, ba, but it's really just a blend of the two extremes. That's why we organized it that way. That's why there's only 12 notes. Ba, like you could split them up, but there's not really a chromatic qualitative difference between ba and the stuff in between. There's not really a qualitative difference. It's just a percentage of ba and a percentage of ba. Ba and the other one, which you get. Ba. So back to what I was talking about, which was nothing related to intervals in music. It was just about being a douchebag who doesn't really know how to connect with the crowd. You know, like you're a performer and you tell people to shut up during the song. That's funny, but not when you're doing it. Like, it's funny regardless of if it's ironic. It's funny that it's not. It's funny that she actually was being serious. Like, of course, it's funny to do it as a joke. Like, if Elton John was like, "You shut up. I like this part," as a joke. Sure, okay. But no, he was doing it. She was, okay. When I was doing it, I was also doing it as a joke. I have this ability to sound like I'm being serious when actually it couldn't be further from the seriousness of the matter. Could be further from the... So I'm not a serious person. That's why I don't have $1 billion. That's why I'm not running a company, a conglomerate, media company. Yeah, I'll admit that I'm not serious enough to do those things. Yet, I could fool people into thinking that I actually believe the stupid things I'm saying, because I have I have an ability to fake this. It's called acting, and it's a musical thing. You need good ears to be a good actor, because you could just tell when somebody is reading a line. That's why Succession was good, is because it was improvised. A lot of it was improvised. So that's why it felt so natural, because no matter how good a script is, it's still a script. Nobody talks like that. People don't talk in one at a time cadences and get interrupted They don't anticipate being interrupted like in scripts, Scripts are just always, there's a fakeness to them. So no matter how good a script is, you can still tell that it's just an actor reading lines 99% of the time, unless it's immersive. But the smarter, anybody can just be like, yeah, it's just a person reading lines. So anyway, I'm good at reading lines. I could make it seem like I'm actually being serious when I'm just fucking around. It still comes off as hurtful. It's still mean looking in every way. But the fact that it's not real should, theoretically, be enough to negate the realness of it, because it's not real. That's the thing. That's why it's good. That's why you should appreciate it, is because it looks real, yet it's an act. You should be like, hey, I see what you're doing. That's a lot of commitment. You should respect the commitment after realizing it is indeed not real. I don't really even have a real personality. I'm kind of one of those guys who just always slips into whatever fits the context, unless I don't give a fuck. Which I don't anymore. I'm polite. See, that's the thing. I have this people-pleasing chameleon personality, which means it's not a personality. It's wearing different clothing. It's not a personality. It's somebody else's personality that you're weaving it around. That's what it is. But if I don't care to please other people, they're going to see something that doesn't really make sense to them unless they get irony, unless they get he's just doing something like he's like Kaufman. He's doing a Andy Kauf. I think it is Andy Kaufman. Whatever. I can't see, whenever you're talking about stuff, you kind of lose the words because you're thinking about the meaning. It's hard to do that. So anyway, Andy Kaufman, he did jokes that were just for himself. Like, nobody got what he was doing. He was like, okay, I'm going to be this character that sings and thinks of himself as a lounge act, Tony Clifton. He invented that character. It was in a show, and I guess people did get it at the time that it was a character. But nobody really was laughing. They were just like, what the hell is this? They didn't get that it was indeed a joke because he took himself seriously. It seemed real. No, he was just committing to the bit. And even if it was only funny to him, that still counts as something. That's still art. I don't know. Like, even if it's not successful for other people, if you're the one that decides, if you're the comedian, it's kind of up to you to do whatever you think is funny. At least that's how I look at it, because I look at it more as the pure artist, like Bill Hicks. Like, yeah, if you don't like it, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to pander to just the audience. No, I'll slowly build my own audience that actually gets what I'm doing. I don't really care about winning over everybody. Same with how, any good artist, I don't think they got good by trying to please other people. They found their own niche that was unique, and it probably was not understood by very many people. It took probably many years for people to go, that is actually kind of clever. Too bad he died 50 years ago. We would have given him a reason to not kill himself. But no, that's the thing about what is the word for geniuses that are unrecognized, whatever. Van Gogh is the one I'm talking about. he killed himself thinking he was just a loser because, of course, society or whoever was around, there was no internet back then. He couldn't just find someone on the internet to be like, oh, that's kind of good. No, he was in some bumfuck town. They didn't have enough people there to recognize his genius because it was 1 in a billion, 1 in a million at the very least. So that means if you don't have at least 2 million people in your city, you might not even might not even be a single person in the whole city that's even smart enough to recognize that you're smart. That's the thing. The smarter somebody is, the smarter other people have to be to even see that they're smart. They won't know to test what is smart about them if they don't have a concept of intelligence that exceeds their own. Right? Doesn't that make sense? Like, you could read on a piece of paper that their IQ is a bigger number than yours. Okay. So that's it, though. Other than that number, they're going to say things that you don't understand. They're going to talk about things using languages and words that you don't understand. It'll fly over your head. And that's it. You can't quantify or experience them being smart if you don't have the same capacity to act as a substrate for their intelligence to glitter and shine, because it is in the eye of the beholder. A piece of paper isn't beautiful. Someone just saying they have a high IQ doesn't inspire beauty. Genius inspires that feeling of like novelty, of like brilliance in other geniuses' heads, or just other people's heads that are smart enough to be like, okay, that is something that's brilliant. You don't have to be a genius to see it in other people, but to see it for the first time, absolutely, yeah, it takes pretty much another genius. I don't know. That might not be that true anymore with the internet. If you put out something good on the internet, if you expose it, if you smear it around, somebody will see some goodness in it. That's the thing about the internet. But you got to expose it somehow. That costs, not everybody just gets exposure just because they put up something on the internet. That's the thing about advertising. The difference between somebody having a career and not having a career is just exposure. And then once you get enough exposure, as long as you're actually somewhat talented, you'll have an audience that you could probably grow and make. But you need that initial boost. And that's pretty arbitrary. The part that's not arbitrary is the talent. Okay, so let's get the show started. This is episode 105 of the Tim Weichelbaum Show. I'll be your host. We're only 18. Okay, I thought we'd been going for longer than 18 minutes. I thought it said 58 minutes. Okay, so we're going to get through this. This will be probably a shorter episode because I'm already kind of losing steam. You know, I don't like standing and talking to nobody for that long without any feedback. It's kind of a lot of work. Okay, so we talked about a lot. Intelligence, what's that? Intelligence is just the ability to process patterns into other patterns that are true and logical in doing so consistently and quickly. There's a performance aspect to it. I mean, but that's it though. Processing patterns. What does that mean? It means taking one thing and converting it into another. Taking one meaning, translating it into another. That's it. It's taking a language, translating it into another language. That's vague. I'm using the term language the way that, not spoken language, I mean the way the brain thinks of language, not just spoken language. Any form of pattern recognition, you could effectively say, is a language. Any system or framework that allows you to go from symbols to meaning consistently, that's a language, right? Not everybody agree. No, that's not the definition of a language. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm positive. I'm giving you something new. I'm giving you something new here. You're like, hey, maybe everything that does this, any framework of symbols pointing to meaning, is probably a language. I mean, what other word would you use? There's no other words for it besides language. So that's why I would suggest that every cognitive process, whether it's a thought or a instinct or a inkling or a visualization in your head, a fucking thing in your head, that's pattern processing. I mean, before you learn a language, you gotta learn what things represent. In some way, you gotta know when you see your mom, that represents something, right? As a kid, as a child, as a baby, before they learn to speak, they do have some pattern recognition of like, okay, this is my mom. This is this entity. And when she is around, it usually leads to some other thing happening. There's a logical connection that is made. Like, oh, I get milk. They make that connection. Is it a linguistic connection? Well, it's a semantic one. It's a symbol that represents a semantic meaning. So I'm not trying to redefine anything. I'm just trying to point out that isn't semantics a linguistic phenomenon? I'm pretty sure if you look up the word semantics, it's related, it's from the field of language. It's a linguistic phenomenon. So the brain is using language to process any patterns that point to other patterns, that can have a semantic meaning. That just means something that points to something else. Does that not involve cognition? Of course it does. Does it not involve the same structures in the brain that do eventually lead to spoken language and process spoken language and any other form of what we call language processing in the brain, the Broca's and the Wernicke's area? Does it not go through those areas when a child learns its first association? Because I'm pretty sure if it doesn't go through at least the Wernicke's area, it still goes through some structure in the temporal lobe where it assigns meaning to that stimuli in a reliable way. This equals that. Is that not effectively the same process that a spoken word goes through, that does go through the Wernicke's area? Does it really matter if it's spoken language or not, if it still has to go through that association process in the brain in order to get into the memory, into long-term memory, not just working memory? Isn't that still a pattern being encoded into another pattern? Isn't that still a translation process occurring? And doesn't it have to encode that relationship using some form of symbolism to get to the semantics consistently? Yes. Logically, the brain, without language, just seeing a mom's bare tit, that is a sentence to the brain. It's like, oh, that equals that. It's an association that has to be encoded. The semantics of drinking milk, the feeling of milk and satiation has to be encoded in order for an abstract thing to be understood, to point to that other abstract thing. Those are both abstract things, right? The concept of drinking milk, the concept of satiation, and the concept of a mother are all equally abstract. Maybe not equally, but they're all abstract, which means there's no concrete way of representing them. It has to be through a symbol. So that's what I mean by everything being linguistic in the brain. It doesn't matter if it's not literally going through the language center. Everything that is encodable has to be linguistic by the definition that I think includes language. I think language encompasses this phenomenon, because what other word is there? Semantics? I mean, that's not enough. It's more than just semantics. It's the whole thing. It's the whole process of glyphs, words, sentences, vocabulary, lexicon. Okay, that's enough technical mumbo jumbo from the depths of my pattern processing node network known as the cranium. No, it's not called the cranium. They just call them the brain. It's a very nonchalant word for where our consciousness situates. It situates in the brain. Does it come from the brain? Does consciousness, let me ask that again. Does consciousness come from the brain? I would say not quite. I would say no, it's attracted to the brain, because the brain is like opening a window in a quantum super intelligent field that anywhere it's a field. There's a consciousness field, just like there's a electromagnetic field. There's a field for pretty much every known quantity in physics, and consciousness is the one that is probably underlying all of the ones we've measured so far. There's a consciousness field. So our brains pick it up like antennas. So it just sucks it in. It attracts consciousness. So does that mean our consciousness exists without brains? No, not your consciousness. Your consciousness is just the same as everybody else's, so it'll go right back to where it was as a neutral field, as a neutral vacuum, random. We can't describe it quite yet. We don't know what it's the same as everybody else's. It goes back to this unified semantic field, as you could call it, where all meaning is just the same thing. It gets individuated by consciousness using metaphors to explain other patterns. I don't know why. We don't know why, but we wouldn't be here if not for that. So your consciousness, the reason it's different from others is, of course, because you have a different brain. The brain is a substrate that consciousness flows through, but as it does this, it has to rub up against all the software. Okay. I would like to make sure that it's still recording. My bad. I'm recording on a Macintosh, and these things are not as good as Windows when it comes to customization. You're kind of pretty much stuck with. It's really that's the beauty of owning your own operating system and the hardware. If you own the whole biome, if you own the whole, not biome, ecosystem, then yeah. So anyway, your consciousness has to go through all the bullshit in your head, and that's what makes it look different from other people. That's why you have different intelligence, you know? But the consciousness that's flowing through it, it's nothing special about that. If you took it out, this is a trippy thought experiment that I'm sure other people have talked about if you take philosophy courses or something. But this is not mainstream, widely talked. This is not a mainstream thought experiment that I'm about to shit down the chimney on you. Is if we switch bodies with somebody else, would we change? Would anything change? Like literally, if you switched bodies with me, including the brain, you don't get to keep your brain, just the consciousness. If just your awareness, your sense of self went from here to there and it flip-flopped, would literally anything change? No. You wouldn't even notice that you had it gone anywhere because you'd be in their brain. How would you know that you've left? You wouldn't have your memories anymore. You would have their memories. So you wouldn't have a memory of being in somebody else's body. You would have felt like you haven't gone a single inch. Yet, that's what happened. Your consciousness literally went from one person to another. It totally did move, but is there any noticeable difference in your perception, in your sense of awareness whatsoever? How could there be? No, because everything that gives us a subjective experience is unique to our local software and hardware. The consciousness is just the same shit. It's just batteries. It's just fuel. It's completely non-unique. So that's why you don't really have to get sad when somebody dies. Because they're just the same thing as you. Just in a different body. There's nothing really, they're not gone. They went right back to the consciousness field. And who knows? Maybe their intelligence does get preserved in some way. It's not impossible to reconfigure the existing framework somewhere else that made you unique. It's just that there's nothing really special about the raw consciousness. So that thought experiment already logically kind of proves that all consciousness is the same thing. Because we wouldn't know otherwise, even if it was. I mean, how would we even... I don't know. I guess there's no logical proof that... This doesn't logically prove anything. It's just a thing that can't be disproved at this time. So maybe at some point we will be able to prove it. I think actually this is not just a this is not just a philosophical open-ended thought experiment. I think there actually is a unified semantic field that is, you could call it a consciousness field, but the reason semantics is the word is because meaning, it's the same thing. Everything that's different does come down to semantics. That's why people say that's just semantics, man. Come on, man. That's just semantic. Because what they're saying is, no, it's the same thing. Whatever I'm saying, you're just getting bogged down by semantics. So that's why it actually is the appropriate word for what I'm describing. If everything really is the same thing at the center, at the fundamental root of the universe, then it's also semantically the same meaning. The only thing that makes it look different is when we create something else out of it that resembles something different, but that's an illusion. The actual raw ingredients is formless. It's just one thing. You can't talk about it as anything that has non-uniform qualities because it's one thing. Okay, I got that one out of the way. So the next step of this, to actually keep going down the rabbit hole, okay, so consciousness is a fundamental field, not something that the brains produce. The brain just enhance. The brain just provide a stable place to hang out, to spin around, like to have fun. Otherwise, it would just be kind of unstable, random vacuum fluctuations, which are not random. It's not random. It's that it's a consciousness looking around for something to do. So if consciousness really is the most fundamental thing that we have, that means free will is also probably one of the most fundamental forces. If there's anything that's a force, it could very well be, if you are actually thinking, is not with your hard physics brain and actually thinking with your metaphysics brain, we could extrapolate. I forgot. I forgot what I was saying. Okay, maybe free will actually is not just a real thing, but the most real thing we have. Free will might be the most powerful, if not the only fundamental force we have. Everything else just comes from there. Everything else just emerges from the complexity of free will, allowing us to play around and create new emergent properties, whether on purpose or accidentally through mistranslation. Whether it was on purpose or not, there's still free will there. That's why mistranslations happen. There needs to be some ability to choose which meaning to go for. And yeah, this is really, when I use the word meaning, I'm talking about anything that could be measured, anything in reality, anything that's thinkable. That's a lot of shit. And we can't really talk about this without talking about language. Because if there is anything if there's any form of, okay, this is getting boring. I really am just doing a monologue about bullshit metaphysics. As if I'm like some fucking pseudo-scientist who rehearsed this. Of course I didn't rehearse this. This is just shit that I'm just finding out. Okay. So the source for this is just ChatGPT. Is just me, machine learning, and people that died a long time ago. And some physicists, I'm sure some physicists believe in this wonky shit, but they'll have their own version of it, which won't quite be as refined as it won't be as good as mine, because there's no frame. I mean, okay, unless they happen to also say that language is, then I'll be like, okay, you got it. But if they don't use the word language or grammar or pattern processing, if they don't understand that there has to be a substrate written and read between any two intelligent entities, which is a language. I mean, that's language, right? Reading, writing. That's kind of what languages are all about. if they don't mention that that's what reality is kind of in any system doing, except for quantum entanglement, except for that one exception where I guess there could be some form of direct communication, everything else requires first you writing it down. I sound so serious, like a fucking angry. Okay, I am pissed off because why am I the only one even talking about this? I mean, it's relevant to AI, but not fake. It's relevant to true AI because we're talking about real intelligence. We're not talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about the human brain. And we're talking about particle physics. That's real, not artificial. So, to get back on my high horse. Besides quantum entanglement, which is a direct form of maybe not even communication, just a direct form of correlation. What is it communicating except for, okay, one state is this, the other state has to be the opposite. Okay, is that really, what does that allow you to communicate? Regardless, okay, so aside from that, everything else does require you to write something down on a piece of paper, metaphorically speaking, and then for that other entity, whatever it is, a star, a radio, it has to decode that intermediate language into one that it understands. So there's always a language intermediary in between you and the information being discussed. Isn't it? I mean, okay, so that's true with spoken language, of course. You rely on intermediate languages like this one, to know what I'm trying to say. That's not a direct form of communication. If you could see what I was thinking directly, it would be in a much more efficient language. It would be much more, I wouldn't be able to even describe it in words. That's why we need words. Because actual complexity that it does go on in reality is very hard to just be like, blah. It's hard to just use body language for that. You kind of need something more sophisticated. So anyway, that's what an intermediate language is. Is there anything that's not that? Is there a way to communicate any meaning without an intermediary symbol that points to it first? Or can you just deliver the meaning directly to somebody? Like, let's say you're at a restaurant and you want the waiter to give you the check. Is there a way to directly communicate, to implant that meaning into the waiter's head? Like through telepathy or something. Even then, you would still have to give them a symbol for what they want you to do. You know, like, can you just give them the meaning of giving you the check? Not easily. Not without using a shorthand, a symbol of some kind, even if it's just going like this or like this. I don't know. There's some sign language for give me the check. That's not direct. That's an intermediary language. There's no way to directly communicate anything with anybody. You can only send them a representation of the more complicated visual semantical process that you want to have take place. Thank God we don't have to do that. We don't have to be like, yo, can you get me the check so that I can pay you for this transaction, which will involve you walking from wherever the fuck over here, and then so it'll involve a lot of shit, man. I'm going to have to take a pen out. Yeah, thankfully, we understand semantics without all that symbology. We just kind of get, it's called heuristics. We just get, oh, okay, that means he wants me to go over there, ring him up, print out this little piece of paper, walk back. It's a lot. But that's the beauty of abstraction or language. Yeah, I'm using the word language for any form of abstraction. Why not? Sure, we could just use the word abstraction, but then you go, wait, but what is not doing that? Wait, everything is an abstraction. What's an example of something that's not an abstraction in language? Describing something requires an abstraction because there's no way to directly, just whatever word I used, implant semantics into somebody else's head. It requires an abstract symbol that points to that more complex thing we already learned. We don't have to teach them the whole thing. So, that's abstraction. What else do we use language for? What other usages are there if not to describe something that's abstract, language itself being an abstract symbol? So that's why that's why you kind of need to take a little bit of DMT to really get what I'm saying. I'm saying, yes, language is the thing we use to describe meaning. Also, anything meaningful, probably also just another abstraction, which means it's just another language, which means there's no processes that are not linguistic, which means we live in a linguiverse. Okay, but then you go, well, what about quantum entanglement? And what about the wave function where it's just random and there's no meaning? Well, there's meaning, right? There's consistency to it, so there's meaning. Just because it's red, you could apply a wave function to literally any non-deterministic process. That doesn't mean we're done. That doesn't mean it's like we finished, we're done, we figured out the end of the universe. It's just random. It's just a random cloud of distributions. Yeah, you could apply that to a lot of things. That doesn't mean we're done understanding what it is. You could apply that to if somebody becomes an athlete. You could be like, okay, so there's a 1% chance that he'll become an athlete. And it might be here, he might be here. We don't, there's a percentage chance. It's very accurate, but okay, but he could also be millions of other places. So reducing it to a wave function isn't the end of quantum physics. So that's what they would say. They would say, so what do you say about quantum entanglement? That's a pretty direct form of communication. It's like, right? It's like, well, have you looked into it? Have you even read the Wikipedia page on it? Because they say it's not a form of communication. You can't transfer classical information. It's just that those two particles are entangled. They feel very related to each other. Okay, but other than that, they're the same thing. They have gone to their semantic unified field. They're just in a state that is identical with this other particle, so we can't detect a difference. It's not the same particle, but it shares at least one of the same properties as another particle, so it appears in a state of correlation. It's okay, but the second we measure it, it's going to become classical. It's going to do a wave collapse, which is also another thing that's not really, it's I'm still a noob when it comes to quantum physics. So yeah, I'm not going to act like I am able to talk about, like I know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm still a noob when it comes to even metaphysics. And so yeah, it's Dunning-Kruger on display here. Very much, and I'm going to look back at this and go, you didn't even know that? I'm going to look back at this and be like, oh my God. Yeah, you kind of got part of it right, but you're still so dumb. Because even when you look back at yourself at a younger age, yeah, it's embarrassing. You go, yeah, I was very naive. But you still have to recognize even back then, just the sum, you had to get something right. If you ain't even getting anything right, fuck. If you can't even get anything, if you're not even getting anything right, yeah, you shouldn't be doing this. But after 4 months of intense research with other outsourced PhDs helping me, not just me, so far we haven't found anything that flies in the face of my theory, which I will take ownership for. I mean, somebody's got to take ownership for it. My thing is very there's a novelty to it that can't be shaken out because there's nothing else. Biosemiotics is close, but that's just biology. Semiotics is everything. Semiotics, signs in semantics, language. Yeah, okay, you could say semiotics. It's probably just another word for what I'm describing. It's just, instead of language, they're using a more specific word. But it's still a study of language. Language is the umbrella term that describes any intelligent framework, system, or set of symbols that can be used to communicate. They might not all be as sophisticated, but the umbrella term, I'm really cracking myself up here. Whoa, I guess I'm a comedian all of a fucking sudden. Anyway, I'm not a comedian. I don't like telling jokes. I mean, once or twice, I like to tell a funny thing, but jokes? Hey, knock, knock. Can you imagine that being your career? Hey, so I was at the store the other day, and that's a lie. They weren't at the store. I was at the store the other day, and so it was like, dude, how do you tell a fake story multiple? You're a liar. You're a fucking liar, and you don't even think it's funny because you told it 100 times, so you're a double liar. So you're fake. So yeah, I don't condone doing that unless you're super autistic and that's just all, and you just happen to like that, then go, by all means, be a robot. As long as you're getting better. I don't even care. Be a bad comedian. Don't improve. Tell the same joke exactly the same way thousands of times without even thinking about changing it or making it better. Because I don't care. But you should at least be improving. You should at least be like improving upon them. Like every joke should evolve. It should have a life cycle. Like just because I don't fucking want to do comedy myself, I perfectly know what it takes to do it. These are fucking write jokes. And as long as they're good, you keep doing them. But that's the part that I couldn't do. The keep doing them part. I'm an improv. Anyway, I'm looking at a bug, but I don't know. It's like one of those little bugs that's like not quite a beetle, not quite a fly. It's in between a beetle and a fly. It's one of, it's like, it's like a mini, it's like one of those stink bugs, kind of. Those are like, it's small. It's very small, or else I would have to turn off the show. I wouldn't just leave the show on with like a huge bug. Okay, we done yet? Holy shit, it's been 55 minutes? Okay, so we're going to end on... So I covered a lot of bullshit, science, pseudoscience, not even close to science. How would you test if we live in a linguiverse? That's a metaphor. Okay, I can't really disprove it either, so... You can prove it. I mean, you could go through the gauntlet of things, of entities, and you will run out. You'll be like, okay, stars, those are translating photons and atoms. They're creating new elements through nuclear fusion. Is that a direct form of communication? Well, first of all, it's not even nobody calls it a form of communication. So that's a weird example, but it's subject to cause and effect in time. And so, it's not a direct form of communication, requires a substrate. And okay, that's one. Human communication, we've already talked about, requires a substrate no matter what. Okay, that's an easy one. What about just like a molecule? Do those communicate? Yeah, they, in a sense, they communicate their states to other molecules or other atoms. Okay, is that direct? No, they also are subject to the same physical laws and substrates, whatever that means, even if it's the electric magnetic field. I mean, you could say space-time is the substrate for that. Okay. So there's no... What process in the whole universe allows for direct communication and not writing down information to a substrate, translating it to the other language that the person actually understands? Everybody has their own version of English, their own version of how to process that language. So there is a translation process going on, even if you think it's not happening. Cognition, instincts. When you get an instinct, is that direct? Is that a direct form of communication? Well, no. It's some input that you translate into some other meaning. Right? We don't really know. That's where it gets fun. That's where maybe there is something we could actually test or experiment on more than just with logic. You could get very far with just logic, as you can see. Look at where I'm at. Look how far I got in life. This whole studio financed by logic. So, okay, is that it? So yeah, there's nothing that doesn't apply. There's nothing that is not, in a sense, linguistic. So we already kind of proved it on paper logically. But okay, this big whoop. So it's a meta framework. It's not scientific. It's just meta. It's just a way of describing things we already kind of know. And if there's something we don't know, you could apply it and be like, okay, well, we know it's some type of communication process, pattern process between nodes and a node network. But that doesn't really seem that groundbreaking, even if it is groundbreaking in a way that's never been said before. What does it predict? And I think that's where I still think of course, I still need to freaking do the work, but Let's start with cognition. Let's start with animal instinct. Is that not a form of language? Well, it depends what animals you're talking about, first of all. It depends. Now we got to look at their brains. Not all animals have the Wernicke's area, but I'm pretty sure all animals have a language, or else they wouldn't know how to organize or discern meaning. Anything that allows you to discern meaning in the definition of the brain, at least, forget about what humans define it as, is a language. I think we need to study the brain to learn the definition of language, because that's the one thing the brain actually does have its own definition on. Okay. So, yeah, and then patterns. Another fun thing. Let's end on a light note. This has been a very heavy, dark episode. Let's end on a positive. Light note is that astrology is bullshit. Yeah, Jim Morrison was right. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. He was right when he said that. He was also very drunk. Nevertheless, I gotta turn on, my screen keeps turning. Astrology is not entirely bullshit, but what it is complete bullshit, yes. But there's still something that we could use the term astrology for to describe that actually probably is true. And that is that the signs, the constellations, those patterns, those 2D patterns in the sky, since they've been there for millennia, since they've been the same for all human activity, yeah, they probably do influence our behavior and our DNA, just because they've been around for so long that the culture that assigned meaning to them, it got influenced. It was just so much repetition that the culture actually does influence DNA. So that means it's possible that there is actually signs, there's actually sentences or code in our genomes that correlate with constellations in some vague way. And maybe if somehow the human brain is able to sense where those constellations are, maybe it does through the visual cortex, maybe those patterns do unlock certain genes, or they activate those genes. And there you go. Now all of a sudden, you're a Scorpio. Not so non-scientific anymore. It's not so pseudo-scientific anymore. Sure, everything that's written about astrology is complete bullshit, but I'm saying that if we actually did experiment, and I'm just saying, it's a hypothesis that it's possible that there could be a mechanism for astrology. Not that there's any truth to the existing field of astrology. That shit all got lost in translation. That's why every religion eventually goes out of date. Every religion eventually goes stale because the words go through all these layers of translation, man. Eventually, so we need a new religion, man. And it has to be true. A good religion is only good if it has a new trueness to it that we didn't have before. Otherwise, why the hell would we care? So we need a new, true religion, and then in a couple thousand years, that one will need to be updated. Because otherwise, you're just being dogmatic. What's the difference between a religion and science? Well, let's say, I don't know. The only difference is how willing it is to change, how adaptive is it to evolve to where it gets better. That's the only difference between those two things. If they both are unchanging, dogmatic systems of knowledge, they are indistinguishable from each other. Those are just religions that require faith. And it's okay to have some faith. That's another form of intelligence. It's not just bullshit to have faith. There's a intelligent version of faith, and it's subtle. It's a subtle thing. It's not just like, oh, I believe it, so it's fucking there. I'm done. No, it's not that. It's a little more subtle than that, and it takes a little more humility. You kind of have to submit yourself to something being a little more powerful than you, and then it's kind of hard to not fear God. You know, you don't have to even believe in God. Just knowing that the universe is much stronger and smarter than you, that's enough to kind of just know that there's more out there than just human knowledge. So yeah, it's okay to have a little faith in the universe having knowledge that is yet to be seen. We done yet? Okay. This has been Tim. This has been episode 105 of the Tim Vice Bomb. Sorry for the emo. So the reason I got the emo haircut is because it was styled originally to be like a pompadour. But I don't style my hair, and now it's just too long to be styled that way. So it's just like, now it's an emo. Now I just look emo. Now I kind of like it. I'm going to keep it.